Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're all about taking those really fascinating, sometimes dense materials you've brought to us and extracting, well, the good stuff.
Exactly. Think of it like a shortcut to understanding the core,
Yeah.
of whatever it is you're trying to wrap your head around. And we always try to pick out those real gems, the ideas that'll stick with you and maybe even like spark a new perspective.
Absolutely. And today we're diving deep into a classic. Excerpts from The Prophet by Kahlil Gibran. I mean, come on. This is a work that's touched countless people with its wisdom, its poetic
Oh,
wisdom.
no, for sure. Gibran's The Prophet, which, by the way, was published almost a century ago, it presents us with the teachings of a man named Almustafa right as he's about to leave the city of Orphalese after like 12 years there. And it's this moment filled with a real sense of anticipation, but also, parting.
Right? It's bittersweet, isn't it? So picture this. Al-Mustafa, he's waiting for his ship, ready to return home, which is, of course, exciting. But he's also leaving behind a place where he's clearly formed, deep connections, had a whole range of experiences. And he even talks about these fragments of the spirit, he calls them, that he's gathered there.
And as the ship arrives, right, the whole community gathers around. They're eager to hear from him one last time, to soak up any final wisdom he might have to share. And it's actually Almitra the seeress who speaks for them. She asks Al-Mustafa to like lay it all out there to share his truth before he sets sail, which, perfectly sets the stage for what we're going to be diving into today. Al-Mustafa's reflections on like all these fundamental aspects of life.
Yeah, he really covers the gamut. We're talking love, marriage, children, giving, work, joy, sorrow. I mean, even the meaning of our houses and clothes. And it doesn't stop there. He delves into buying and selling, crime and punishment, the nature of laws and freedom, the interplay of reason and passion, the role of pain, the whole journey of self-knowledge, the art of teaching, the value of friendship. He talks about talking, time, the duality of good and evil, prayer, pleasure, beauty, religion, and yeah, even our understanding of death. It's a lot to unpack.
Oh, it is, but that's where we come in, right? Our goal for you, the learner, is to really sift through all of that and extract the most impactful and enduring insights, to like uncover those little nuggets of wisdom that might make you go, ah, those moments where something just clicks, or maybe just something to like ponder for a while, some good food for thought, as they say.
Okay, so let's jump right in. And naturally, one of the first and I think most powerful themes Mustafa addresses is, well, love. And right away, he makes it clear this isn't just about, roses and romance.
Right. Right from the start, he throws us this duality of love. He says, even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning. I mean, that's pretty intense. It acknowledges right off the bat that love isn't all sunshine and rainbows. There are challenges, even painful aspects that, come with territory of deep connection. And the thing is, those very challenges are what often push us to grow and evolve.
Right. I mean, we've all been through those tough relationship moments that in hindsight, you realize, okay, that was hard, but I learned something.
Exactly. And he goes even further with this image of love as this transformative process. He says it gathers us, refines us, threshing, sifting, grinding, kneading, and then get this, assigning us to the sacred fire. It's like this powerful image of alchemy, right? Love taking us apart and then putting us back together as something, well, more refined.
More complete, yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's that line that always gets me. Love gives not but itself and takes not but from itself.
Huh.
Just, wow, it's so self-contained, so pure.
Absolutely. And then he goes on to say, love possesses not, nor would it be possessed, for love is sufficient unto love. And this
Hmm.
is like such a critical shift in how we often think about love, right? Instead of viewing it as this thing we can own or depend on for our own happiness, he's presenting it as this liberated, self-sustaining force.
So true. And then he describes these desires of love, right? To melt like a brook, to know the pain of tenderness, to wake with a winged heart. It's like this beautiful spectrum of emotions, from the gentle to the ecstatic.
Absolutely. And he even like elevates the experience by suggesting that when we love, we're not just feeling some divine presence within us. We're actually dwelling within the heart of that divine presence, which is, a pretty mind-blowing concept.
Okay, so moving on to marriage. This is where Al-Mustafa offers some, well, maybe countercultural ideas, especially around this whole idea of togetherness and space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that famous phrase, let there be spaces in your togetherness, I think that really sums it up, right? It's all about nurturing individuality, even within a deep union. And he uses these like such vivid images to illustrate this. He talks about a moving sea between the shores of your souls, filling each other's cups, but not drinking from the same cup, being like separate strings on a lute that like vibrate with the same
Oh, I
harmony.
love that lute analogy. It's like shared music, but distinct instruments.
Yeah.
And then he says that, you give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping. For only the hand of life can contain your hearts. So it's not about one person holding on to the other's heart, but rather there's this greater force at play.
Exactly. He's emphasizing that sense of something larger guiding the relationship. And then there's that beautiful line about standing together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. So it's not about one person overshadowing the other. It's about like mutual support and shared purpose, but with space for each individual to grow and thrive.
Yeah, it's like individual strength within a shared
Hmm.
structure. Beautiful imagery.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about children. Now, this is, I think, where some of the most frequently quoted and, well, just deeply felt words from the prophet come in.
Oh, absolutely. And like right off the bat, he throws this curveball. He says, your children are not your children. They are the sons and daughters of life's longing for itself.
Mm.
Just boom, it totally changes how you view the parent-child dynamic.
Completely, because suddenly you're not the owner. You're more like a vessel or a
Uh,
guide.
exactly. He goes on to say, they come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. It's a potent reminder, right? They're their own people with their own unique journeys to undertake.
And then he gives that great advice. Give them your love, but not your thoughts. For they have their own thoughts.
Mhm.
And house their bodies, but not their souls. For their souls dwell in the house of tomorrow.
Mm.
I mean, it's so important to let them form their own beliefs and, chart their own course.
Oh, absolutely. And sometimes it's hard, right? Especially as
Yeah.
parents. But it's crucial to like honor their individuality and nurture their future without, trying to impose our own ideas on them. Like
Mhm.
think about how different each generation is, right? Their world is so different from ours.
It is. And then there's that incredible metaphor of parents being bows and children being like living arrows,
Hmm.
propelled by the archer, which is life itself. Just wow.
Such a powerful image, right? And then he says we should find gladness in being bent by the archer. Because that stretching, that shaping, it's all part of what allows our children to fly true and far. It's a beautiful way to think about, the challenges and the inevitable letting go that comes with parenthood.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about giving.
Hmm.
Almustafa makes this really important distinction between, just giving your possessions and the deeper act of giving of yourself.
Yeah, he's very clear about that. He says, you give but little when you give of your possessions. It is when you give of yourself that you truly give.
Right. It's about something much more profound than just material things.
And then he goes on to talk about how we often hoard things out of this fear of future scarcity. And he says, fear of need is but need itself. It's like we create our own lack by clinging too tightly to what we have.
Right. And then there's that great image of, the overprudent dog burying bones in the trackless sand. Like, what's the point? You're just going to lose them anyway. And then he touches on the emotional side of giving, saying that, like, giving with joy is its own reward. Whereas, giving with pain can be a form of, like, purification,
Yeah.
a baptism.
Yeah. What he's really getting at is the motivation behind our giving. He's like distinguishing between those who give just for show, for recognition, and then those who give freely out of a genuine abundance of spirit. And he actually calls those people, believers in life.
And the thing is, you can always tell when someone is giving from the heart, right? It just feels different.
Oh, totally. And he also points out that the most meaningful kind of giving is the kind that arises from true understanding. When you anticipate someone's need before they even ask it, like think about a time when someone just knew what you needed without you having to say anything.
Oh, yeah, it's powerful. And then Almustafa makes this point about those open-handed givers finding even more joy in the very act of finding someone to receive their gift. It's like a totally different way of thinking about that whole dynamic.
It is. And then he goes on to say, all you have shall someday be given. Therefore give now, that the season of giving may be yours and not your inheritors. He's urging us to, like, live generously in the present.
Right. And then he extends this idea even to those who, might seem undeserving. He uses like the natural world as an example,
Yeah.
how trees and flocks give so that they can continue to thrive.
Yeah. He says, "It is life that gives unto life, while you, who deem yourself a giver, are but a witness." And then, to the people receiving the gift, he says, "Assume no weight of gratitude." Like, don't make it a burden. It's all part of this natural flow.
Wow. It really does change how you think about it, doesn't it? That whole cycle. Okay, let's talk about work. Now, Almustafa sees work as so much more than just, a way to make a living.
Yeah, he views it as this fundamental way to connect with, like, the earth and its spirit. He says, keep pace with the earth and the soul of the earth. And he talks about how idleness, how it kind of separates us from those natural rhythms, makes us a stranger unto the seasons. He even says that work is like a way to fulfill a part of Earth's furthest dream.
And I love that line. He says, "When you work, you are a flute through whose heart the whispering of the hours turns to music." It's such a poetic way to think about work as this creative, expressive act.
Oh, it is. But then he's also clear that all work is empty, save when there is love.
Right.
It's got to come from the heart.
Yeah. And he describes, what it means to work with love. He says, weave with threads drawn from your heart, build with affection, sow seeds with tenderness. It's about putting your whole self into it.
Exactly. And he reminds us that, like, even the smallest task has value. Even a blade of grass, he says, receives the wind's whisper just as sweetly as a mighty oak.
Right.
So it's not about the grandeur of what you're doing. It's about the spirit you bring to it.
So true. And then he ends with this really powerful statement: work is love made visible. And if you cannot work with love, but only with distaste, it is better that you should leave your work. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement.
Oh, it is. He's saying that, like, the energy we put into our work, it shapes the outcome. It impacts the world around us. Think about it, right? The person who made your clothes, the person who prepared your food. You can feel the difference when it's made with love, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about joy and sorrow. Now, this is interesting because Al-Mustafa sees these two seemingly opposite emotions as, well, deeply interconnected.
Yeah. He starts off by saying, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. And the selfsame well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears." It's like they're two sides of the same coin.
Two sides of the same coin. And the deeper that sorrow carves into us, the more capacity we have for joy, right?
Mhm.
It's almost like our ability to feel happiness is linked to our willingness to also feel sadness.
Right. It's like our emotional range expands, the more we experience life. He uses these great metaphors too, like the cup that has endured the potter's fire is the one that holds the most precious wine, and the lute that has been hollowed by knives is the one that can soothe the spirit with its music.
I love those. And then he says, like, when you are joyful, look deep into your heart, and you shall find it is only that which has given you sorrow that is giving you joy. When you are sorrowful, look again in your heart, and you shall see that in truth you are weeping for that which has been your delight.
It's so true, isn't it? And then he talks about how joy and sorrow are inseparable. They arrive together, and when one is present, the other is just like waiting in the wings.
And then that image of us being like suspended on scales between them, only finding balance and emptiness. It's all about this constant interplay, this ebb and flow.
Exactly, like the natural rhythm of, of life itself. He's saying that when the treasure keeper, which I guess you could think of as life itself, when it weighs our experiences, our joy and our sorrow, they have to move in equal measure.
Okay, let's move on to houses. Now, Al-Mustafa's view of a house is, well, it's not just about shelter, it's much deeper than that.
Oh, for sure. He says, "Build of your imaginings a bower in the wilderness ere you build a house within the city walls." So, like, our inner world, our dreams, our aspirations, those should lay the foundation for our physical spaces. He even calls our house our larger body, like it's an extension of ourselves.
He actually talks about like longing for this more dispersed way of living, wishing that our houses were scattered in forests and meadows with valleys as our streets.
Yeah, it's this like yearning for connection with nature and a less confined existence. But, he acknowledges that fear has driven us to cluster together.
It has. And then he asks this really interesting question. He says, what do you guard within your houses? Peace, remembrances of yesterday, beauty, or comfort? Tell me, are these things the things that make you a man?
Right. What are we really protecting? And then he goes on to warn against the lust for comfort, which he calls this stealthy master. It can like quietly tame our deeper desires and aspirations. Think about it, right? Sometimes seeking constant comfort can prevent us from having those more challenging but ultimately more rewarding experiences.
Yeah, I've definitely been there. You get so comfortable and suddenly you're not reaching for anything new anymore.
Exactly. And he actually says that lust for comfort murders the passion of the soul. So it's not just about being lazy, it's about losing that spark. And then, he contrasts that with this vision of what our houses should ideally be. He says, not an anchor, but a mast providing direction. An eyelid that guards the eye, offering protection but not obstruction, and certainly not tombs for the living.
Not tombs for the living. I love that.
Mhm.
And then he reminds us that our true self, our boundless self, resides in this mansion of the sky.
Exactly. And that our home, our ultimate home, isn't limited by those physical structures.
Okay, let's talk about something seemingly more mundane. Clothes. Now, even this gets a philosophical spin from Almustafa.
Oh, for sure. He observes that our clothes, they conceal so much of our inherent beauty. But, they also fail to hide what's not beautiful. And then he makes this point about how the privacy we seek in our garments can actually become like a harness and a chain, restricting our freedom, and preventing us from connecting fully with the world.
And he talks about how modesty, it might have originated from shame as a way to shield ourselves from what we perceived as, I don't know, unclean. But then he asks, what's the point of modesty if those unclean elements are no longer present?
Right. And then there's that beautiful reminder. The earth delights to feel your bare feet and the winds long to play with your hair. Just that simple image of connection with nature. It's powerful.
Okay, let's shift gears to buying and selling. Now, Al-Mustafa emphasizes how important it is for these exchanges to be rooted in love and fairness, to
Yeah.
reflect the abundance of the earth.
Yeah. He views the earth as this generous provider, right?
Right.
Yielding its fruits. And he sees exchange as this natural way to like distribute those fruits. But the key is it has to be done with love and justice. Otherwise, it just becomes greed and creates scarcity.
And I love how he talks about invoking like the master spirit of the earth within the marketplace,
Yeah.
bringing a sense of sacredness to those transactions.
Yeah. It's like remembering that there's something bigger at play. And then, he has some pretty strong words for those who are like barren-handed, but trying to sell their words for labor. He basically says they'd be better off doing some actual work.
Right. Get your hands dirty.
No.
But then he also acknowledges the value of artists, singers, dancers, musicians. He sees their offerings as like nourishment for the soul.
Yeah. And what's really cool is he says that no one should leave the marketplace empty-handed. He thinks that like disturbs the peace of the earth. It's this vision of a more, I don't know, compassionate economy
Right.
where everyone benefits.
So let's talk about crime and punishment. Now, this is where things get really interesting because Al-Mustafa takes a very unique perspective on this. He really focuses on our shared responsibility.
Yeah, he starts by saying that, wrongdoing, it's like our spirit wandering unguarded, and any harm we inflict on another is ultimately a harm to ourselves.
And he kind of challenges this whole idea of the criminal as being someone completely separate from us. He says the wicked and the weak cannot fall lower than the lowest which is in you also.
Yeah, like the potential for darkness resides in all of us. And then there's that image of the leaf turning yellow with the silent consent of the whole tree.
Right. So he's implying that even wrongdoing, it happens with a kind of hidden collective will. It's so interesting. And then he says, and as one of you falls down, he falls for those behind him, a caution against the stumbling stone. Aye, and he falls for those ahead of him, who though faster and surer of foot, yet removed not the stumbling stone. Right. So like when someone stumbles, it affects everyone.
Exactly. We're all connected. And then, he makes this kind of controversial statement. He says that even those who are like murdered or robbed bear some level of accountability.
Ooh, that's a big statement.
It is. And he goes on to say that even the seemingly righteous are not entirely innocent of the actions of the wicked. It's like this radical concept of collective responsibility.
Wow. It really is. And then he says, those we label as guilty are often themselves victims, they carry the burden of guilt for others who remain outwardly innocent.
Yeah. It's like, who are we to judge? He even compares the just and the unjust to black and white threads woven together, so it's not so black and white.
Right. And true judgment requires a deep understanding of everyone involved. It's complicated. Okay, so Al-Mitra then asks Al-Mustafa about laws. And his response is, Well, it kind of questions their ultimate effectiveness.
Yeah. He starts by talking about how we, like, love to make laws, but then we also kind of get this childish delight in breaking them.
Okay.
You know, like kids building sandcastles and then gleefully destroying them.
Right, but the ocean, the larger forces of life just keep rolling.
Exactly. But then he talks about how for some people, life isn't this playful ocean, and laws aren't just sandcastles. You know, for them, it's like a solid rock and an unyielding chisel.
And he gives these really poignant examples. The cripple who resents dancers, the ox content with its yoke, the aging serpent unable to shed its skin. It's like they project their own limitations onto the world.
Right, and they create these rigid rules based on their own experiences. And Al-Mustafa says they stand with their backs to the light, so they only see their own shadows. And those shadows become their laws.
And then he asks those who walk facing the sun, what need have you for laws?
Exactly. Like, if you're already living in alignment with the light, what need do you have for these external rules? And then he ends with this powerful image. He says, you can muffle the drum and you can loosen the strings of the lyre, but who shall command the skylark not to sing? You know, you can't legislate the human spirit.
Love that image. So powerful. Okay, let's talk about freedom. Because Al-Mustafa believes this is something we often misunderstand and even enslave ourselves to.
Yeah, he actually says that he's seen the freest among you wear their freedom as a yoke and a handcuff. It's like we become prisoners of our own idea of freedom.
Right, we cling to it so tightly that it becomes a burden.
Exactly. And then he says that true freedom, it only comes when even the yearning for freedom ceases to be a constraint. It's like you're no longer seeking it because you've already found it within yourself.
So it's not just the absence of restrictions, it's an internal state of being.
Exactly. And then he goes on to say that it's not just external authorities that oppress us. He's saying that even unjust laws, they reflect our own inner conflicts, like the tyrant's power originates within us. And even the burdens we carry, the anxieties we have, they were often choices we ourselves made.
So we are often our own jailers, in a way.
In a way, yeah. And then he ends by observing that, like, everything within us, the things we desire and the things we dread, they all exist in this constant state of embrace. And that even when freedom breaks free from its initial constraints, it can then become the constraint of a greater freedom. So it's like this ongoing process.
Always evolving. Okay. So Al-Mitra then asks about the interplay of reason and passion. And Al-Mustafa presents these two as vital partners in our lives.
Yeah, he compares them to, like, the rudder and the sails of our soul's journey. If either one is damaged or missing, we're in trouble, either directionless or dangerously out of control.
So reason alone is like too restrictive, and passion alone is, well, chaotic.
Exactly. He says that, your soul is oftentimes a battlefield upon which your reason and your judgment wage war against your passion and your appetite. And that ideally, our soul should elevate reason to the height of passion that it may sing, and direct passion with reason, that your passion may live through its own daily resurrection and, like the phoenix, rise above its own ashes. It's about finding that balance.
That integration of head and heart.
Yeah. And then he advises us to, like, treat our judgment and our appetites as equally valued guests within ourselves.
So it's not about denying one or the other, but finding a way for them to coexist.
Right. He associates reason with the inherent peace found in nature and passion with the awe-inspiring power of, a storm. And as beings connected to both the divine and the natural world, we should find our grounding in reason and our movement in passion.
A woman in the crowd asks Al-Mustafa about pain. And his response is really about reframing pain as a necessary catalyst for growth and understanding.
Right. He says that your pain is the breaking of the shell that encloses your understanding. Like the seed within a fruit that has to break through its outer layer to reach the sunlight. We have to experience pain to expand our awareness.
And he goes on to say, if you could keep your heart in wonder at the daily miracles of your life, your pain would not seem less wondrous than your joy. And you would accept the seasons of your heart, even as you have always accepted the seasons that pass over your fields.
Yeah. It's about seeing pain as part of the natural cycle, not something to be feared or avoided.
And then he makes this point that so much of our pain is actually self-inflicted. It's like a bitter potion that we administer to ourselves because deep down we know it's what we need to heal.
Right. It's like this inner wisdom at work. And he tells us to trust that inner healer, to accept the remedies even when they're unpleasant because they're guided by a caring hand.
Okay, next up is self-knowledge. Now, Almustafa really emphasizes the importance of trusting that intuitive wisdom that we all have. the stuff that lies beneath the surface of our conscious thoughts.
Yeah. He says, your hearts know in silence the secrets of the days and the nights. But then our minds, they want to articulate it all. We want to put our insights into words and grasp our dreams intellectually.
Right. It's like we have this deep well of knowledge within us, but then we try to scoop it out with these tiny little buckets.
Exactly. He actually compares it to like the hidden wellspring of our soul needing to rise and flow towards this vast ocean of understanding. But he cautions against trying to like rigidly measure or define this infinite world with our limited tools.
And it gives this great advice. He says, instead of saying, I have found the truth, you should say, I have met a truth. And instead of saying, I have found the path of the soul, say, I have met the soul walking upon my path. It's like acknowledging that there's always more to learn.
Right. And then he describes the soul as something that like unfolds organically, like a lotus flower with countless petals. It's not this linear, predictable thing.
Okay, so then a teacher in the crowd asks Almustafa about teaching.
Mm.
And he really emphasizes the limitations of just, transmitting information.
Yeah, he says, no man can reveal to you aught but that which already lies half asleep in the dawning of your knowledge. So a good teacher doesn't just like dump their wisdom on you. They guide you to your own understanding.
They walk alongside you. And he uses these like really great examples. He says, the astronomer may speak to you of his understanding of space, but he cannot give you his understanding.
Right. The musician may sing to you of the rhythm which is in all space, but he cannot give you the ear which arrests the rhythm, nor the voice that echoes it. And the mathematician may tell you of his understanding of numbers, but he cannot give you his understanding.
It's like we each have to arrive at our own understanding. We can't just be handed someone else's.
Exactly. Okay, next up is friendship. Now, Almustafa sees this as a profound and mutual fulfillment of our deepest needs and desires.
He actually says your friend is your needs answered, and he is your field which you sow with love and reap with thanksgiving.
Yeah. And your friend is also your companion, your board and fireside. They offer both sustenance and comfort.
And he talks about the freedom within true friendship, to be yourself completely, even when you disagree, and that deeper level of communication where you don't even need words.
Yeah. Think about those friends you can just be silent with, and still feel totally understood. And then he says something really interesting. He says that parting from a friend shouldn't bring excessive sorrow because their essence might become even clearer in their absence.
It's true. Sometimes you don't realize how much someone means to you until they're gone.
Exactly. And he says that the purpose of friendship should be, mutual growth, the deepening of the spirit, not about any other agenda.
So it's not transactional. It's about something deeper.
Exactly. And he encourages us to offer the best parts of ourselves to our friends, share the good times and the bad times.
Be real.
Yeah.
And he talks about seeking out your friends when you have, like, hours to live, meaning with a sense of purpose, not just when you have hours to kill.
Yeah. Like, be present, be intentional. And he says, when your friend speaks his mind, you fear not the nay in your own mind, nor do you withhold the a. And when he is silent, your heart ceases not to listen to his heart. For without words, in friendship, all thoughts, all desires, all expectations are born and shared with joy that is unacclaimed. Beautiful, right?
So beautiful. Okay, let's talk about talking. Because according to Almustafa, we often talk out of a discomfort with our own inner silence.
Right. He's saying we talk when we lose our peace, when we can't handle the stillness of our own thoughts.
So it's a distraction.
Yeah. And then he says, when you meet your friend on the roadside or in the marketplace, you salute him with your eyes and with the motion of your hands. But if you are passing him in the forest, you will embrace him with a glance. Sometimes words aren't even necessary.
Sometimes silence speaks volumes.
Right.